Good evening. I'd like to call the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021 to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the meeting agenda. Moved by Councillor Reevy, second by Councillor Abdallah. All in favor? Approved. The minutes from the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting of September 21st, 2021 has been circulated. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, motion to approve. Councillor Jackno, Councillor Plummer, all in favor? Accepted. New business, road closure for Rogers hometown hockey event. Ron?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Staff are recommending that committee approve a road closure on Lake Street from December 4th to the 6th of this year in order to host the Rogers hometown hockey event. The city was successful in being awarded the Rogers hometown hockey event from the 4th to the 6th in the parking lot at the Pembroke Memorial Center. Logistics will require Lake Street to be closed off in the vicinity of the PMC from Frankenheimer Drive to Christie Street. The Christie Street Hill will be a one-way southerly traffic only for the duration of the event, and access for drop-off at the arena will be from the Monroe Street access only. Initial planning and layout of the footprint of the event are not completed, but the need to restrict or reduce traffic will be required. Staff have been in conversation with the Silver Stick Committee as well as the Pembroke Lumber Kings regarding access to drop-off players as well as individuals with mobility issues. While there are no financial implications with implementing the road closure for the event, there will be costs associated with the event and traffic control at these locations.
Questions, comments? Seeing none. Councillor Plummer?
I would move that we approve the road closure for the Rogers hometown hockey event.
Okay, moved by Councillor Plummer and seconded by Councillor Abdallah. Any other comments? Seeing none. All in favor? It's been approved. Thank you. Next on the agenda, event funding request, Robbie Dean. Mr. Lapierre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You do have my report before you, and this is an item that is coming to you as a result of a delegation presentation and request for funding for a COVID-related mental health musical type of an event in early 2022. The organizers were requesting $8,500 sponsorship by the city of Pembroke. It was tabled until such time as additional information could be brought before committee, so we're bringing it to this committee this evening. There was two questions that were asked. One was, would the performer be willing to record the show so that others could benefit from it afterwards? He has responded that he would not be able to do that for various production reasons. The other question was, have other municipalities been approached to determine if they're willing to fund? So I received a call last evening that the organization did reach out to surrounding municipalities as well as the County of Renfrew, and they're pleased to advise that they wish to withdraw their funding application to the city because the County of Renfrew has agreed to come on board and fund the sponsorship. So they did indicate that they wished for me to relay their appreciation to council for its consideration. And also I've provided you some information that they just provided me today that there are other less costly sponsorships available for this particular event for interested parties. And they're just wondering if council would like to support this event in some way by perhaps doing one of these sponsorships, or even if council wishes to purchase a block of tickets that would benefit local community. So again, they place that before you, but certainly the main message was to thank you very much for the consideration, and they're grateful that the County of Renfrew is stepping up and going to provide support to this worthwhile event.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor Reevy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really have to commend the county for stepping forward to fund this. Right off the top, I thought it was a great idea. Just we all had concerns that that they certainly did look into. So really, it's a valuable evening with Sean McCann. I think it can really help a lot of people out there in one way or the other. And I would be prepared to move that the city become a Row of Hope sponsor, which they're asking $1,000 for that, and would give us 12 tickets plus recognition. And I think that that could be funded through the COVID dollars if council agrees. So that would be my motion.
Councillor Abdallah, so we have a motion on the floor. So do you want to comment or do you want to second it?
I'll second it, but my mic's not working.
So Councillor Abdallah,
I'll second that.
okay, it's working, it was working. Further comments? Councillor Jackno?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to agree with Councillor Reevy about the county stepping forward. We do work with the county and other venues as well, and I'm pleased to see that they've done this to support, because it impacts all of Renfrew County, and I hope that it'll be a wonderful evening for those that participate. And I hope that our other municipalities will also pick up some of these minor sponsorships. I think it'll be a great thing. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is, just to echo what's being said, it's nice to see that the County of Renfrew is stepping to the plate. However, it's my recollection that this municipality pays to the County of Renfrew in excess of $1 million a year in account of mental health, as well as issues of mental health and addictions and that sort of thing. So it's nice to see that they're stepping to the plate, but in reality, it's, if you want to follow and trace the funds, they're actually using the funds that we're providing to the County of Renfrew. But it's nice to see that they are appropriating our funds to the correct location, if I can put it that way. It would be nice to see if there's other situations in the city of Pembroke, including the grind. It would be nice to see the County of Renfrew step forward in respect to some of those items as well. So certainly I would support what's being put forward. I would also like to see, we're heading into budget. I know that on Wednesday night I met with Mr. Lewis, Director of Operations. We were discussing a number of different parts of the budget. I would like to see, and it's sort of off topic, but it's not. We keep coming and talking about these COVID funds. I see on the council agenda for this evening, we're talking about parking and using COVID funds for that. We're talking about using COVID funds for this. When I meet with Mr. Lewis, we talk about materials doubling and tripling in price. So I'd like to see staff take a serious look at the use of COVID funds, what we plan on using the COVID funds, and actually using them for the operation of the city of Pembroke on real costs. My concern is that a number of good causes will continually come forward, whether it be this and so forth, and they're all good causes, but we're going to continue to whittle away at this 290-some thousand, which is less than that now in light of the parking and in light of this. So in any event, I would like to see some direction to staff to look at that, but I'm prepared to support this, but those are my comments in terms of those COVID funds.
Councillor Abdallah?
Thank you, Councillor Lafreniere. So each situation where we get financial requests from groups, be it rent the PMC and don't charge for the rent, every case is different. We are going through a pandemic, and I work in the education sector, and I've been talking to various educators, and I know full well that mental health is a challenge, in education and in the community. And Sean McCann has such a powerful story to tell, and the Robbie Dean Centre do great work for the community, and they receive no government funding. And so I think on a case-by-case basis, this is very worthy of our support using the COVID money, because as staff mentioned in their report a couple of weeks ago, it does fit into the communication plan, and I'd like to see Mr. Lapierre comment on that, the COVID communication plan, like how this fits into it.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Yes, as was reported at the last meeting, this is an item that council can provide funding from the COVID allotment from the province of Ontario, because it goes in line with providing support to the community at large. Council's provided support to local businesses. Council, through its communication planning, has sent messages out to the community. So this is an extension to that, to give a message of hope to individuals that are struggling through COVID, and as we start coming out of COVID, to develop strategies to deal with that.
I'd like to comment from the chair. I can definitely support the Row of Hope sponsor that's been put forth. I just want to echo what Deputy Mayor said, though. I'm really happy to see someone go to the county for a request like this, because a lot of people are not aware that, as the Deputy Mayor said, we're not a standalone entity when it comes to costs for social service, anything like that. We contribute substantially to the county. So they really should be the first go-to person when an organization of social or health that is a charity, they should be really going to them first, because they hold the purse strings for basically all of us. Now, something I would like to see going forward is, I know that Petawawa and the Township of Laurentian Valley have a policy in regards to charitable requests. I think maybe we should look at a policy like that, that when it is a charity, a social service or health service, it should be probably recommended that they go to the county as well, because like Deputy Mayor said, we do still pay a portion of that. It's still not going to be free for us, but let them make that decision, because they have all the big health committees. They're working with them every week or every month. But anyway, I'm not going to belabor this. Robbie Dean does do great work. No doubt, none of us can debate that. So we have a motion, we have a seconder. I will call the question if there's no more comments. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. I guess that was the final formal thing. I just want to, as the Chair of Recreation, give big kudos and shout out to the community and to the recreation staff, sponsors and members of councils, because we're going to have a Christmas parade. Woohoo! And I mean, it may happen a little later. You may have to wear an extra pair of long underwear, but I think our community has really tried to pull together during these hard times. And I mean, hopefully we'll come out in good numbers and stay distanced and wear your mask if you can't. And thank you very much. I'll call for a motion to adjourn now. Councillor Reevy, Councillor Plummer, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Operations Committee to order for November 16th, 2021. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Lafreniere, second by Councillor Plummer. Those in favor? That's carried. The minutes of October 19th, 2021 were circulated. If there's no errors or omissions, I'd entertain a motion for their approval. Moved by Councillor Lafreniere, seconded by Councillor Reevy. Those in favor? That's carried. This evening we have two items up. The first up is waste collection schedule. Mr. Lapierre, are you bringing it in, or is Mr. Lewis going to join us?
Mr. Lewis is on screen, not that screen.
Okay. Great. Welcome, Mr. Lewis.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Operations Department recommends essentially a status quo collection schedule for 2022-2023. Every year around this time, the city, in consultation with the Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Centre and the waste collection contractor, sets the collection schedule for the coming year. The present schedule ends in March of 2022, and the new collection schedule will span April 2022 through March of 2023. jump ahead in my report for just a moment. There is no immediate financial impacts related to the recommendations within the report. The budget for waste and recycling will be discussed as part of the overall budget discussions in January. And our contract for waste collection does not expire until March 28th of 2025. So we do have that collection contractor with us until 2025. As in the past, Mr. Chair, I'd like to discuss the department's recommendations for each waste stream separately. And if possible, get a motion on that particular stream before we move forward to the next stream. That may help simplify the discussion and document the approvals, if that's acceptable to the chair.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start with the Christmas tree collection. Starting with Christmas of 2019, at the direction of committee, city forces have been used to collect Christmas trees annually at a cost savings over using the waste collection contractor. This year's Christmas tree collection will be conducted on January 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2022. That's for the 2021 Christmas. The operations department recommends a status quo, a 3-day Christmas tree collection event for Christmas 2022 using city forces on regular waste collection days being January 9th, 10th, and 11th of 2023. So if I could get a motion on that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Councillor Plummer?
I would move that we approve status quo.
Okay, and do I have a seconder for that one? I have Councillor Reevy, you're seconding it. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? That's carried, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. We'll move to the next one, the large item collection. Large item collection service is for residential properties only. Twice a year in the spring and in the fall, the city provides residential properties with curbside collection of large household items. Appliances, scrap metal, and electronic waste are collected separately for recycling, and all other large items collected are landfilled. Miller Waste, our collection contractor, provides a large item collection over 1 week for all 3 partner municipalities. The operations department recommends a status quo. 2 large item collection events. A spring large item collection event, the week after the long weekend in May, being May 30th and 31st and June 1st of 2022. And a large item collection event the week after the long weekend in September, being September 12th through the 14th, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Do I have a mover for the status quo position? Moved by Councillor Frenier, seconded by Councillor Plummer. Any discussion on this particular item? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Leaf and yard waste.
Leaf and yard waste collection. The existing contract provides for 2 weeks of leaf and yard waste collection in the spring and 3 weeks in the fall. Staggered weeks versus consecutive weeks has helped in the past to alleviate some issues due to the unpredictable fall weather. If spring arrives late with a 1 week notice, Miller Waste is able to accommodate an additional leaf and yard waste collection in June of 2022 at an hourly rate with total cost based on the amounts collected, and that would occur on organics and fiber collection weeks only. The operations department recommends a status quo. 2 staggered leaf and yard waste collections in the spring of 2022, the first full week of May being May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of 2022, and the 3rd full week of May being May 16, 17, and 18 of 2022. In addition, 3 staggered weeks in the fall, the week after the long weekend in October being October 17, 18, and 19, the 2nd week in November being November 7th through November 9th, 2022, and the 4th week of November being November 21st through November 23rd of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Councillor Jacquinot?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we accept the recommendation.
And Councillor Reevy,
I'll second it, but I do have a comment, if I may. I think this
Certainly.
is working really well. I love the 3 weeks in the fall. However, I think our dates were a little skewed. This fall, the collection came during both moose season and deer season, and I had to take all of the bags on both occasions out to the curb. But anyway, I think it's working really well.
okay, yes. Okay, is there any other comments? Failing which, call the question. Those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Green bin collection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Contract provides for green bin collection every other week from September through May, and for weekly collection of green bins in the summer months of June, July, and August. This is proposed to continue for 2022. So the Operations Department recommends status quo. Green bin collection every other week from September through May, and every week, June through August.
Mr. Lewis, Councillor Abdallah.
I'll move that we accept the status quo.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Reevy. Call the question. Those in favor? That's carried. Back to you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. Mobile hazardous or special waste events. The cost to the city is minimal as part of the operations of the Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Center, Waste Collection Center, with a third contractor retained to conduct the event and retail profits through various provincial programs. The Operations Department recommends the status quo. An event is being scheduled for Saturday, May 14th at the Petawawa Civic Center, an event on Saturday, June 4th at the Pembroke Area Community Center, and a third event on Saturday, August 20th of 2022 at Rockwood School in Laurentian Valley. It should be noted that previously scheduled events in 2020 and 2021 unfortunately had to be canceled due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. However, we're hopeful this year's events will go off without a hitch.
Okay, can I have a motion moved by Councillor Plummer? Okay, seconded by Councillor Lafreniere. Any other any questions or comments in respect to this item? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? And that's carried. And last but not least, Mr. Lewis, garbage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The contract provides for a maximum of 4 bags or containers collected every other week. Typically, single residential dwellings in the city put out between 2 and 4 garbage bags or containers. The Operations Department recommends the status quo, garbage collection every other week with no change in the quantity.
Councillor Reevy,
I move we accept status quo.
and seconded by Councillor Plummer. Yes. Any questions? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next up we have transit feasibility study, and I believe we have Mr. McCowan on as well.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening. Do you want to provide your report to council?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so tonight's report is going to seek to do 2 things here. Firstly, we're going to be providing a status report or an update here on the first phase of the transit feasibility study to bring that forward for everyone. And secondly, we're going to be seeking direction on the continuation of the transit feasibility study into a second phase. And so, as you all know, Pembroke does not currently have local transit services for the public, but the 2019 and 2022 strategic plan did identify transit and transportation as a key priority for the city. And so we hired Paradigm Transportation Solutions Limited earlier this year, and I've been working with Tom Willis, the project manager, since earlier this summer for the last few months now on this project to investigate how we can make this potentially work and then implement it into the city. And so we have now completed the first phase of the study. And that entire report has been attached for you. We'll do just a summary of that tonight. And the second phase would begin immediately upon approval if that were the recommendation tonight. So we'll begin tonight just with a summary of phase 1 from Paradigm, and then we can begin after that. So from Paradigm's perspective here, they did note that a wide variety of trip types are made within the city's boundaries. And Pembroke is, of course, a compact city with most land occupied by one single urban area. And employment and other amenities are spread over multiple locations rather than being in one single spot. And it is the region's economic center, and Pembroke has amenities that serve the wider region and not just its residents. And we saw this in the demographics and in the stats that we pulled from, which Paradigm was largely using 2016 census data. And that was showing a lot of information from people coming from outside of the region into Pembroke for those commutes and for other travel. So multiple groups need or would benefit from transit service based on this. The demographics and travel patterns of Pembroke's residents indicate there are multiple groups who have a particular need for transit or would benefit from being able to use these services. These would include students, seniors, people without easy car access, but it would also potentially then include people commuting to work and people traveling to or from amenities. So some of the key factors that we really looked at here were Pembroke's higher amount of seniors than both the provincial average and the district average. As well, the median total income of residents in Pembroke is at $29,538 compared to the provincial median at $33,539. And approximately 64% of Pembroke residents earn under $40,000 per year, which does showcase potentially a need for public transit. And presently for commutes, just some information that may be relevant. 81% do actively drive vehicles, 10% use active modes of transportation, and 9% are passengers in vehicles, whether that's being driven by someone else or in a taxi or whatnot else. So this study did take into consideration a lot of other needs, including patterns of land use, density, street network, pedestrian facilities, demand levels, and financial considerations. And so when it all boiled down, there were two models that were considered potentially suitable of every potential model really out there. And so we'll really look at those two models to present them here tonight. And do remember that right now, for tonight's purposes, we are just looking for a recommendation to move forward into phase 2 of this study. But these were the recommendations that came out of phase 1 anyway. So the first model is fixed route, and fixed route is what you would be used to from a traditional transit model. And this operates along a preset route following a schedule of when to stop at each transit stop. It's easiest to follow in areas where the street network allows routing to be in straight lines. It's easy for people to understand. It's a very simple system. It's predictable start times and end times and durations for everyone. The administrative overhead is very low, but the potential issue here is that we might not generate sufficient demand for it in a small community. And we have seen this in the past because a fixed route system is what was previously in Pembroke. And these do tend to not potentially work in smaller communities because sometimes there is not the demand there to justify running enough buses. The other model is a demand responsive model. And this is something that is a little newer. So the route of the transit vehicle will depend on the needs of the passengers that are using it. And it responds to the travel demand. So it's limited to a specific geographic area or set of origin points that we would select, and that would be done in phase 2, actually selecting those points. You will see in the full report some sample points, but that would actually be done in phase 2 as far as some real concrete ones and how that would work. Passengers are then picked up or dropped off at those preset points based on that demand and how it goes, as opposed to it just driving around all of those points. And the greater efficiency then allows for more boardings per hour, which in turn reduces the number of required vehicles and the operating costs as a whole. However, this does require pedestrians to buy into this a little more because it is a little more complex. It's a little more maybe something that people are getting with in terms of things that are similar to what we've seen perhaps with people walking to and walking from rideshare things similarly now with apps like that as well, but with a full transit model. And so we would need full, strong sidewalk support as well with this, because there would be some walking to and from potential stops. And so with that in place, Pembroke would be a strong city for this. But we do have to take into consideration that it is something a little newer, something a little different than people are used to here. And so those were the two systems put into place as being potentially suitable, a fixed route and a point-to-point demand responsive. In terms of the actual operation of the transit system itself, there were three options that were put forward. The first, very simple, just an in-house operation, and that would be the municipality doing the entire thing, employing all of the people involved, operating and maintaining all of the vehicles, and procuring and owning all of those vehicles and all of the facilities involved as well. The second would be a private contractor where the municipality just pays a contractor who then would employ everybody to manage, operate, and maintain everything and take care of all of that. And the third would be an intergovernment collaboration where a municipality would contract with a government agency or another municipality to operate transit or to provide those services. And this is seen more in smaller municipalities that are perhaps linked to or very close to larger municipalities to branch off of that. I have seen instances of that happening there. And so the advantages and disadvantages there are similar to private contractors. So they don't have some things within their control there. For vehicles themselves, we do have two main options that are on the table for both of those two models, fixed route and point-to-point demand responsive. The first is a standard bus, which we have a capacity of 30 to 60 roughly. Those have a lifespan of 10 to 12 years. And we're looking at capital costs of $500,000 to $600,000 each. And then a passenger van where we have a capacity of 12 to 18. Also a same lifespan of 10 to 12 years and capital costs of $50,000 to $100,000. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that a point-to-point demand responsive service generally does require more frequent turns than a fixed route service does. And so depending on where we do put those stops, if that were the route or if that were the model chosen, that may make buses unsuitable because of how wide those turns would have to be due to some of the roadway widths within the city. Now, with regards to electric vehicles, there are some, we have some options out there. We do know that we have councillors interested in going electric with the vehicles. And so we did continue to do some further research. And so we have continued to look into this. And while we said in the initial report here that electric vans are not commercially available, we continue to look through this weekend. And while they're not easily available from a commercial standpoint, it does appear that there are some potential opportunities available for custom builds to be done, as well as potentially some smaller American companies that they may be available from. And so this would be investigated further in phase 2. and could result in revised recommendations coming from our consultant with regards to that. Now, with regards to the rest of things with electric here, electric buses are also available, and at depot charging would be required. Throughout that, it wouldn't be able to be charged en route. It would have to be done at a depot. Costs of electric buses typically are about 50 to 100% higher than standard buses, depending on what the battery capacity or your full range is. And so looking at that cost of 500,000 to 600,000, you're looking at 50 to 100% higher on it, depending on what exactly we're looking at. And that's something, again, that in phase 2, we'd be getting some exact costs on. These costs, though, it is worth keeping in mind that there are significantly lower maintenance costs, and there are savings on fueling, of course, throughout the lifetime. And there are offsets with grants that are available. And so presuming that those grants are obtained, which not to put the cart before the horse, but if those grants were to be obtained, then that would also reduce those costs as well. So those life cycle costs can end up equaling out by the end of the vehicle when all is said and done between the diesel and the electric buses. The thing is, with problems with securing vehicles right now, we're looking at a significantly later start date as far as actual implementation goes if we were to go the route of electric buses versus going diesel. And so that's something to keep in mind if we were to ever explore the way of electric here. And so that's something that the committee is going to want to be mindful of. If they do want to explore electric, we're looking at a significantly later start date and implementation date. So that's just to be mindful of. Now, a transit solutions peer review was conducted as part of phase 1 as well, with 4 municipalities with similar populations within Ontario. We looked at Cobourg, Port Hope, Tillsonburg, and Kenora. It's worth keeping in mind that all 4 of these did have fixed route services until earlier this year when Cobourg made that switch to a point-to-point demand responsive. Because like we said, fixed route is typically the norm, and we're starting to see that switch start to potentially come with some newer systems. So a lot of these numbers are working with purely fixed route systems. But analysis has shown that throughout Ontario, Pembroke would be the least populous municipality in the province to provide transit separately from another municipality or government. Operating costs ranged annually from $225,700 to $680,000 among those 4 peer municipalities. And operating cost per capita, based on our size, paradigm estimated we could be anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 based on those numbers. And again, this is something that would be explored further in phase 2 to get us to an actual estimate to give us something concrete to work with. Annual ridership ranged wildly from 12,500 all the way to Cobourg at 189,000. Something wildly high for a population of 19,000. And using Pembroke's population, then they could infer a ridership range anywhere from 11,000 to 135,000. Cobourg really throws off that number, but it does show how high something could potentially be as well. And fare box recovery ratio is something that's going to be high on our minds here. And that is the percentage of operating costs that come back based on the actual fares. And these within those 4 municipalities range from 11% at the lowest to 24% at the highest. And so keep in mind that the other 89% to 76% would need to be covered by other sources, whether it's through ratepayers or through sponsors or through any other measures. And so that's a lot of remaining costs still to be covered. So we did put out a virtual public information center to provide information to the public during this summer, and that was put onto our website and viewed by many members of the public, downloaded hundreds of times on our website to provide some base level analysis and findings and some draft recommendations from Paradigm to invite some public feedback as well. And that led right into our online survey. And we as well put physical surveys into the long-term care homes, as well as at some of the recreation centers here in Pembroke and at City Hall and at the library to try and gauge responses from as many people as we could. And in the end, we got 1,186 responses from people, including 871 from people who identified themselves as living here in Pembroke. Paradigm noted that this was through the roof compared to what they normally see in a city with a population as low as ours. And so it really showed an interest from people one way or another in talking about transit. And so the key takeaways from that survey were that 72% of respondents who acknowledged that they live in Pembroke supported a property tax increase to support that transit service. Respondents' relationship to Pembroke revealed that support to that property tax increase was higher among people who attend Algonquin College or who have household members who attend Algonquin College or who have high school students in their household. And so this shows that there are potential benefits or at least perceived potential benefits to households with teenagers or young adults, or at least they understand those potential benefits. There was no significant variation in the results between people who read the information beforehand that was made available online and who didn't. And so that shows that people are at least tending to have their notions whether they want to pay for this or don't want to pay for this beforehand. And so that's something to keep in mind here. The travel mode that people use was a very strong indicator of what they wanted to see or if they wanted to pay for this. 86% of people who acknowledged to use taxis said that they would vote in support of this. 78% of bikers as well, 75% who said they're a passenger in a vehicle, whereas just 64% of people who said they just drive a car. We saw a lot of support increase in residents based on their household size. The more people in the household, the greater the support generally. And we saw support decrease among people based on their age. It typically went down based on how old people were, the support for the property tax increase. Now, among support for the transit service in general, 57% of respondents said they would expect to use a transit service in general, and 88% said they knew someone inside or outside their household who they would expect to use it at all. Respondents' relationship to Pembroke revealed that the expectation of using transit was highest among Algonquin College students at 74% and high school students at 70%, but lowest at only 52% among people who just visit Pembroke for reasons besides working, studying, or shopping. Outside of that, we had the travel mode again strongly affect this. 96% of people who normally use taxis said that they expect to use transit, which shouldn't come as a surprise to us, compared with only 45% of people who said they normally drive, and 68% of people who said they're normally passengers in a car. And so it shows us that people who have less car access are going to be more likely to use transit, which should come as no surprise to us. And so despite the fact that there were considerably more and wider variations in some of these subgroups compared to what we saw in the support for property tax increase. Paradigm said that this is typical and this is normal, and that they see this from municipality to municipality. Now, what we saw in those comments were some of the things that we anticipated seeing, because there was just an area for comments to be made based on anything they wish to say, positive or negative. And negative ones from people who opposed transit did say that they cited unhappiness with existing or raised property taxes, the need to prioritize roads being fixed, and past failures with fixed route local transit systems within the city. Whereas those who supported transit identified the numerous groups who would benefit from a system like this, as well as all of the issues for those people and how this would alleviate those issues, as well as the environmental benefits that would come with this, and the impacts that would come from this, such as improved access to healthcare, jobs, social interactions, and shopping for residents and visitors here. And so to get into the recommendation on a future transit system in Pembroke that came from Paradigm here, based on this phase 1 report, they ultimately recommended the best option for a conventional transit is a point-to-point demand responsive service run by a private contractor using city-owned diesel passenger vans. And again, we can, using what we have seen, we can explore electric vans here and see what is out there and what is possible, and that recommendation could change. The city should conduct promotion and marketing jointly with this operator, and it should also consider switching to electric if and when they are readily commercially available. And so those reasons really are that point-to-point demand responsive offers these lower walking distances, more flexibility in stop spacing, and lower end-to-end journey times than the other reasonable options for these service delivery models. A private contractor would bring transit management expertise, which we don't currently have anywhere here within the city, and follow typical practice at many municipalities of our size. And city ownership of the vehicles would allow us to take advantage of grants for vehicle purchases and to control the vehicles and the specifications of those as we desire to. And the recommendation on the vans themselves was because the capacity of them is suitable for what we require and would minimize the life cycle costs given the fleet size that we're likely to have. They did recommend as well that for specialized transit, for the non-general public, to continue our existing relationship with Pembroke Handy Bus, who do currently operate a door-to-door demand responsive system using diesel passenger vans, and to explore partnerships with other municipalities, Algonquin College, and seniors housing providers, as well as some other partnership opportunities that are out there and will continue to be explored in phase 2 if the recommendation is to continue the study. So as they recommended, a partnership with Algonquin College could see this potentially being built into their tuition, into some sort of UPass system potentially. And this would see a steady source of revenue being brought in, and then an automatic ridership potentially being built as well. And partnering with senior residences could also enable staff to book trips on behalf of residences or for facilities to pay for residents' transit through a corporate account. And with some of these, if it were in a point-to-point demand responsive system, we could set up those stops to be right outside of some of those residences to make it as easy as possible. And then with those staff as well, they could help to set up those trips to make it as easy as they can for the residents. and that could really alleviate some of the concerns that potentially come with the perhaps more complex model and just a simpler route with the fixed route. They did recommend as well that potentially partnering with major employers or trip attractors could help with some of these targeted marketing efforts and could enable employees, customers, or clients to use transit now or in the future. And so that brings us to phase 2 here. And if we're going to move forward into this second phase as we seek a recommendation to continue this, as we look to this second phase, it's going to be a total cost of $13,500. $6,750 of that is covered by a grant from FCM under the Green Municipal Fund. So it would leave a total cost of $6,750. And within that second phase of the study, what we have left to really go through is to build a conceptual service plan. And that's going to really build this potential transit service. We're going to go through the financial estimates so that we can actually see what the actual costs will be for us, what the real locations will be, where the bus would actually go to, where it would go from, so that we can have a better idea of this, and then know approximately how many people we could estimate would be using it, know for sure what vehicles we'd be using and what we'd need, how many we'd need, build out what our costs would be for riders, and know what we'd build out for that full framework as far as passes go or discounts for users, and how we would build that out as well. We'd be building out budgets as well for our fare box and non-fare box revenue, our operating costs and our capital costs, as well as building out a budget for the first 3 years of operation. And then from there as well, we would be looking at our greenhouse gas emissions, because that is, of course, one of the things that we are looking at as we look to implement a transit system, are the environmental impacts. And so regardless of what's chosen, there are going to be positive environmental impacts, but we do want to see what those impacts are going to be, and what the calculated GHG emissions reduced are going to be. And so that would be part of this phase 2 as well, is getting to the bottom of those numbers. And so that's ultimately what would come out of a second phase. And that is what has been covered in the first phase. And so I'm happy to clarify anything if there's anything anyone wants to have cleared up a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions or anything for anyone.
Thank you, Mr. McCowan. So our lead, as committee knows, our lead has been Councillor Abdallah, and so perhaps Councillor Abdallah wants to add to the report as well, and then certainly it will be opened up to every councillor to have questions for either Councillor Abdallah, who has been doing some research over and above, I think, Paradigm, or Mr. McCowan, who has done a great job. I will say that because it is a very lengthy Paradigm report. And I will be saving my comments to the end, but certainly I have some queries with the Paradigm report. But in any event, Councillor Abdallah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I'm going to start off by making a motion that we move to phase 2, and then I'll speak to the motion after I get a seconder.
And Your Worship, you're seconding it? Okay.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. McCowan, for the detailed report and for working with Mr. Willis at Paradigm on the feasibility study. So close to 2 years ago, the mayor asked me to be the lead on the transit project. So being one who likes to do research and talk to people, I met with different stakeholders. I went to the Good Roads Convention in Toronto twice, and I met up with the staff member, Patrick Kehoe, from the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. So I started corresponding with him. And so he talked to me about the Green Municipal Fund. And before I get into that, I just want to say that, you know, we're very pleased as a council that this is part of a strategic plan. And Councillor Frenier and I, and the mayor, who sit on the Seniors Advisory Committee, we did a survey, the committee, last year, and the number one concern for seniors was transportation. Councillor Reevy and the mayor and I sit on the transit committee, and Councillor Reevy and I sat on a focus group in May, I believe it was, and we saw the demand for transit from them, and I'd met with them on 2 different occasions before then. Yesterday I got a call from Katrina Medina, the new Student Association Director at Algonquin College in Pembroke, and we had a Zoom meeting late yesterday afternoon. And she was so excited that she'd been talking to Jamie Brandberger and she knew about the transit. She put out the feasibility, the survey on her social media and around the college, and she was so excited that we are considering a transit model for Pembroke. And she's in her 4th year. She's a 4th year nursing student at Algonquin, and she said that if this had been here 3 years ago, 4 years ago, our students wouldn't have been such a benefit. And the major thing I got from a conversation was that, you know, the students live around the college, but they don't have a vehicle. International students can't get a driver's license. They live around the college. They can walk to school, but on the weekends they need a vehicle. And also at night school. And she estimated, as did the dean of the college when I met with her a year ago, up to half the college population would probably use the Pembroke transit system. And if phase 2 does go forward, the transit committee will meet with her and Jamie Brandberger, and they'll do a focus group and a survey in consultation with the consultant to determine what more information do they need to determine the revenue stream and what would the price of a bus pass be. And then I asked her a question. I said, how important is it to you and your generation for green transit, for sustainability? And she said it was very important. And she said if Pembroke got an electric bus system, it would mean the world to them. And her generation is passionate about sustainability, if it's affordable. So the big word here is affordable. And what I'm leading into is, when I read the report for the recommendation of diesel passenger vans, I knew there was other options available, which Mr. McCowan has pointed out there is. There's 4 or 5 other options in the market from the research I've done and individuals I've talked to. But they're expensive, they're not cheap, and this is why the grants are there, the government grants. There's a $2.5 billion fund that the Canadian government is administering over 5 years for zero-emission electric buses. There's other funds available too. But I see why they're recommending diesel, because the cost is lower. So, you know, ECOS did a poll recently, and 80% of Canadians prefer EV transit. 88% of Canadians believe that they've been affected by climate change. So when I saw the report for the diesel, and it said when electric passenger vans are readily available, and tonight I hear from Mr. McCown that he's done his research too, and there are some available out there. So any phase 2 we do has to include an electrical component, cost model, revenue model, what vehicles are available. There's different ways of paying for these vehicles. What is the lease rate? You can lease them, you can debenture them, you can use the Canadian government fund to buy them. There's different financing options. So we have to have an electrical option besides this diesel recommendation. And I just want to point out about some of these vehicles. There was a comment in the report about infrastructure. It says Pembroke has the infrastructure for diesel, but 2 or 3 of these passenger vans that are electric have a plug called the J1772 that is the same as the plug outside City Hall that you plug into like a Chevy Bolt. And you can put it in your household garage, just need a stove plug. So that is something that the city could put in the garage and plug it into a 220 hookup. So that's an option also. But this will all come out in the report. And I want to point out that, you know, these things are expensive, and we've always said that, you know, the only way Pembroke can support a transit system, if it's feasible, if it's affordable. And hopefully we can, if we do get one, we can make it sustainable and green energy. That's the end goal. But, you know, if we had to go with diesel for a year or two to get a system up and running, that's fine. But before we do anything, we should, you know, we don't need it would be nice to have a transit system in 6 months, but we have to do our homework and have all the options on the table. And if we have to wait a year or so to get a system up and running, then that's fine. But I just want to point out, when I met with Patrick Kehoe, and the report does say if the city can take advantage of third-party grants, electric vehicles would be the cheaper option over the long run, because it's 80%, you save 80% of the fuel costs over the longevity, and you save 60% of the maintenance costs, because they have 20%, like 25 moving parts versus 2,000 for a bus. But anyhow, before I end here, the three-step process I presented to council a year or so ago, the Canadian Federation of Municipalities Green Fund. Step one is the feasibility study, which is this study here. We're moving into phase 2. We got a grant for 50%. And the goal of the study is a precursor to their pilot project. And the study is supposed to show a demand for transit, which we've done, and it's supposed to show a lowering of greenhouse gas emissions. And you take your baseline data and you take your emissions, how many cars are getting off the road, and what would the benefit of a green transportation system do? And that's what this study, part of the study will show. And that's a precursor to your pilot project, which we can apply for if council decided. And you can get up to $500,000, it's up to the Canadian Federation of Municipalities through the Green Municipal Fund, but you can get up to $500,000 or 80% of your project costs covered for a 1-year pilot project. So for example, we could lease an electric bus or two or van for 1 year and do a pilot project with the transit system. Council would have to kick in money too. But it's better to do a pilot project and see if the transit's going to work versus going out and leasing or buying some type of a bus system. So if we applied for the grant, and if we got the grant, good. If we didn't get the grant for the pilot project, then we'd have another option. So, but I'm just letting you know the options available. Step 3 through the Green Municipal Fund is implementation, where you can get a 15% grant for fleets or for bus purchases and infrastructure, charging units, and you can get a low interest loan up to $5 million. And you can get up to 80% of your costs covered. So that's just one model that's out there that's available to us. And by approving phase 2 of this, we can sit down and look at that model. So we'll have an electric bus fleet model, cost revenue and model, and then we'll also have the diesel option. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's exciting. It's a move forward for Pembroke. Pembroke is changing. We have more people moving to Pembroke. And it's been shown that transit systems lift people up. It helps the vulnerable, people on low income. It also helps economic development to attract new people. We've had many people ask us about transit. So that's all I'll say on this. I want to thank the mayor for giving me this opportunity, and I'll continue to do whatever I can for the city to research and work with the transit committee to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So a question to whoever can answer it, I guess. The demand responsive, so would that be as you pick up, so once you find out who your clients are, who your regular riders are, you basically pick them all up and then take them where they want to go? So is it that kind of, it's based on who is using it? It's not necessarily a fixed route? Is that why it's more responsive? It says it's quicker, less route travel time, that kind of thing?
See, Mr. McCowan?
It's based on every single trip, based on my information of it. So if we had, say, our 25 sets locations, say we had, the PMC, Giant Tiger, the Pembroke Mall, all of these spots set, Miramichi Lodge. It would be based on who was riding at that set time. And the bus or van wouldn't go on that route unless the person was going on at that time. And it would take a route that was based on what made sense for the people that were on. And it would be the most efficient thing based on who was on at that time. And so if you were the only person that was on at that time and you were getting picked up at the PMC, because that was the preset point that you selected as your pickup spot, and you wanted to go to the mall, you would select that and you would go there. But, someone might in the middle have selected to get picked up at somewhere in between. Maybe they selected to get picked up somewhere downtown or maybe at the pool or something. So the bus will stop by and pick them up at that spot. And so pick them up on the way, and they'll get picked up at the pool, and then it'll drop you both off at the mall. But if no one were to request that stop, then the bus isn't going to stop at that spot. It's just going to drive directly there. And so it's more efficient in that way, that it's just going to get you from point A to point B, essentially. And a lot of that in between time, it's just going based on the demand of who specifically is riding at the time. And so it would, from the sounds of what I have understood to this point, it would work based on essentially an app or a call-in system if there was a dedicated transit team during the day. That's, during operating hours, you could call in and do something, or otherwise just use an app for it. And that would be how it would service you to set your pickup or drop off.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So like the college, if you had 10 students that had to be at the college for 9 a.m., well, basically they give you the address, you pick them all up, you go to the college, maybe then you go to the seniors' home. But I kind of like that model, if any, because then maybe the first of the month you can have a certain schedule catering to a certain demographic. You could have certain days going to the seniors' home, maybe Fridays, taking them all to the mall to do their shopping, I like that. Historically, we know it's failed in the city. I mean, I lived through that one too. I mean, I can remember waiting for a bus and deciding it was quicker to walk. So we all know that, because in the city, depending where you're going, it might be a 15, 20-minute walk. So it's like, it's a nice day, maybe I'll just walk, or even a 40-minute walk. So anyway, I look forward to the second phase of this. But I kind of like the call in and say, I need a ride tomorrow, so this is my address, because there may only be 10 users one morning or something like that. So it might be more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Elijah, and also it is an excellent report, but I also want to thank Councillor Abdallah for the amount of time he has put into this, if you wish, portfolio in regards to transit for our community. I think every council, forever, when we've had transit within the city of Pembroke, there have always been issues, but transit, I think, what has happened with this particular report, the important part is the public engagement. So that aspect is, as far as I'm concerned, is finished, and we know that the people within the city of Pembroke would like to see transit within the city. That's number one. If we're looking at the growth of our city over the next 5 to 10 years, we know people are beginning to more and more invest within the city, including residential investment, commercial investment. And I think one indication, as an example, where transit does become very important is we're looking at a whole subdivision that is being built as of this year in the Gulfview area, which is at the other end of the city. So those people as an example, and that will probably end up being one of the larger subdivisions within the city over the next 10 years. So as we continue to grow, I think transit becomes more and more important. And again, I think reality states is that we have to look at a green system, but at the same time, we have to look at the affordability. So what's important to me is that we are moving into phase 2. And with recommendations before us, but I think the important thing is to get into phase 2 as this particular council granted. You don't want to rush into it because this has to be done, I think, right, because we want it to we know the environment's very important. We know there are difficulties with greenhouse gases, but we also want a system that is financially viable, and we know that will last. So to do it right, I think we have to take our time. I'm glad the public engagement aspect is over and is favorable. So now I think it's up to this council to move ahead with it. And I think being realistic, it will fall into the hands of the next council. To probably complete it. But I think the duty is on us to keep it moving forward. And we know the federal government, all political parties at the federal level, are in favor of green type of energy. They all have their different aspects, how they're going to deal with it. But again, what's important to me is moving into phase 2. Secondly, and also looking at everything surrounding the use of electricity as far as the operation of any transit system. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jacquinot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the councillors and your worship who worked very hard to initiate this program. I'm open-minded. I know that, as Councillor Fernier had indicated, we had a couple that had failed in the past, and I think we should learn from our failure and address that. Why did it fail? Not why are we going to be a success, not why are we going to get all this grant money, but why did we fail? And from the failure, perhaps we can indicate how we can become a success. And it doesn't matter how much money you put into the system. The only way it's going to work is if people get on that transit system and use it. I mean, everybody says, yes, I'll get on there. And of course, we won't know until we have the other feasibility study done. But people have to support it. They have to physically get on the bus and use it. And you've got to have a defined route. The fact that, a person can use the app and say, hey, can you pick me up? I don't know if that's going to work. That makes things more disjointed because the bus driver is all over the community. And I think that's the reason we failed the last time. There was no set route with, X number of pickup spots, X number of drop-off spots. I mean, the hospital is one of the crucial areas that people go all the time. You go there, and the waiting room is filled with people. A lot of those people don't have a vehicle. I see them being dropped off. I see a cab dropping them off. And, we would have to determine through the next phase of where the actual routes are required and necessitates the bus going there. I mean, in a perfect world, it's what you call a taxi. When you need to go somewhere, you pick up the phone and say, hey, I want to go shopping now. And the cab's going to go there. But if you call the bus and the bus, I don't know how that would work, but we'll see. But I'm open-minded to supporting it. And your worship, as you said, we're continuing to grow. Councillor Abdallah said economic development is based on having a transit system. People need to know if I have to go to work and I don't have a car, do you have a bus? Because they can't necessarily always afford to get in a cab. So kudos to the workers, and let's see what happens. I will support. Thank you.
Councillor Plummer?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would support definitely looking at phase 2 just on the basis of understanding more, drilling down on what the costs are actually going to be. I think there's a lot of cost estimates in the phase 1. We've completed, we know that there's a demand, but really what is a return on investment and what is going to be the fair rate? I think that will really distinguish if people are going to get on the bus or not, and how that's going to basically affect the overall taxpayer, because as you say, many people may use this bus, but maybe renters and students may not necessarily be taxpayers in the city. They are going to pay a a user fee, but is that user fee actually going to be enough to get some kind of cost payback for the system? So I think it's important that we certainly look at it, understand the feasibility, understand the benefits of it, but be realistic in the end, saying that yes, this is a good plan, but what at the end of the day, do we have the ridership, and what is it going to really cost the taxpayer of the city? Because we've been over the past two councils here, we've been trying to keep to a 2% annual increase. Been very good. I think we've been fair to the taxpayer. Just looking at quick cost estimates, we're looking at $365,000 a year and just running the operations based on, taking the averages here. I just kind of do it some quick numbers. That's quite an increase over your year budget. So we're having quite the debates over $50,000 increase on just free parking downtown. So how do we get that maintenance cost of that, upwards of a few $100,000? Where does that come from? Does it cut from the roads budget? Does it cut from, operations and parks and recs? Where do we find that money? So I think it's important to do phase two, but at the end of the day, we got to be realistic. Is this affordable for Pembroke? Thank you.
Reeve, did you wish to weigh in before I'm going to weigh in?
Sure.
And then we're going to go around once more, and then we're going to call a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I absolutely believe that we need to proceed with the phase two so that, as Councillor Plummer says, we get an idea of the actual cost. It would address Councillor Lafreniere's questions as to what it looks like in terms of route and picking up. So absolutely phase two. And we're getting financial help from FCM for that. So it's good timing. Thank you.
So from the chair, and then we're going to start with Councillor Frenier and anyone else that wishes to speak one more time or has any follow-up questions. So certainly I support the motion. Principally, I support going into phase two to try and, as Councillor Plummer puts it, to try and get to some more factual numbers and figure out and put some meat to the to what this sketch is. I don't normally quote prior councillors, but as former Councillor O'Neill would always say, he says, you can have whatever you want, but you need to pay for it. And I think it resonates with some of the councillors that are here. So it's a nice thing. We understand that it has economic advantages. It brings businesses to the municipality and so forth. But you need to, what is the business case? How is it that you're going to pay for it? And I know that with Councillor Abdallah, we often have a lot of discussions about how I can support certain things, but I need to see, it has to be, you have to be fiscally responsible. How is it that you're going to afford to do it? What is the business case for it? How are you getting there? So it's always nice to have different plans and want to do different things. You got to be able to put that together. The next thing I'm going to say, and it is of no criticism to Mr. McCowan, it's more to the author of this particular report. There's different parts of the report that maybe in the end won't have any bearing on what council eventually does, but there's different parts of the report that I don't quite support just because I've been with the Pembroke Handy Bus on their board for in excess of 10 years, and there's some parts to it that doesn't quite make isn't quite accurate. Let me put it that way. There's parts in the report that's talking about potentially for a different transit system using provincial gas tax, when we all know that the Pembroke Handy Bus at the present moment is the one that receives the gas tax because the city of Pembroke and the township of Laurentian Valley sees the benefit in having what I will call a paratransit system in place. So there's things like that. There's another part in the report that I read that talks about, maybe there's a potential for partnerships, and we all like partnerships, and I get that, but it's talking about partnerships with some of the seniors' homes. The Pembroke Handy Bus already does that, already provides transportation. Granted, you have to contact 24 hours in advance, but it already does that, and it is my understanding that the Handy Bus isn't always receiving the funds directly from the customer, the client that's getting on the system. Sometimes it's the homes, and so we're never privy to how it is that the homes are the ones paying for it. It's always been my understanding, but no one seems to want to tell me in a higher level of government how it is that the homes secure funds to be able to pay to allow someone to go get their hair done and so forth. It's my understanding, I believe, that there's a certain ministry that's funding some of these different trips. So there's that aspect. So there's different parts of the report that, just from my understanding of how the handy bus functions, another item that comes to my mind is, so the Pembroke handy bus has been in existence for over 30 years. So when you look at buses and they say that they're only vans, they're more than just vans at the Pembroke handy bus, so that's incorrect. But in terms of the vehicles, we've tried kneeling buses. In our climate, it was the worst decision that we ever made. The kneeling buses do not like to function with ice, snow, slush, which we're about to move back into again, and with wintertime. So we've learned from experience. And so then I write down electrical question mark. And so I don't take away from, we have a climate action group. I don't take away from individuals that really want to promote, and promote the environment. And I know that things are changing, and we need to try and do what we can for the environment. I just don't know how it functions in the city of Pembroke. It makes me wonder when I see one of the items that says we should own the buses. It'll be a debate when we get to phase 2 as to whether that is the way to go. I wonder sometimes whether we should be owning the buses, because I know what the bills are like with the Pembroke handy bus when the buses are on our roads day after day after day, and I don't know whether or not electrical fits the bill. I know I've had various discussions with Mr. Blackstein. If anyone wants to talk about electrical, you need to talk to Mr. Blackstein in terms of his thoughts on the subject matter. And there's an individual that where he wants to help with the environment and so forth, but he's one of those individuals with expertise. And I know the municipality hires consultants and so forth looking for that expertise. There's certain parts to it that I read and just simply question different parts of it just because of different backgrounds with the handy bus. But long story short, I do support the motion. Want to see where the rubber hits the road in terms of looking at the nuts and bolts of how it would look, what it would cost. Is Algonquin College willing to do like other schools in larger centers? I know when I went to university, I had to pay for a number of different things that I didn't use, but I had to pay for it because it was part of my base tuition, base costs. So is Algonquin College willing to do something like that to make it financially viable for the city of Pembroke as well? So number of different questions, and I guess we stay tuned, and if it passes, we go into phase 2 and try to get those particular answers and make a fiscally responsible decision. So that's my comments, and so we'll go around for the second round for anyone that wishes to ask questions or to comment, starting with Councillor Frenier.
Just a quick comment. Councillor Jackno says we should look at the past and see why we failed and then use that to learn. But then he said he didn't think that the destination pickups would work, or calling in. And, well, I think, like, I grew up in Toronto. We had buses every 6 minutes at the stop, but they could afford it. And they also had the ridership back then. I mean, I'm talking the 70s, 80s. But I don't think we have the ridership. We have to build it up. So I think we do have to start small. Everybody plans ahead now. You reserve. So if you have someone, yes, it has to get to work every day for 9, well, they let the bus driver know, and they pay ahead. So everything can be done ahead. You reserve your spot. So everybody knows you're committed. If you don't jump on the bus, you've lost your money. I'm sorry. It's like booking a theater ticket. So I think that that's a great idea. I like that idea of the demand. It's not much different than like an Uber or a ride share, but we can build it. And if we feel we need to build a route, we've got people in different areas, then we can grow. So I think that's what it's all about. It's just taking it one day at a time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Gervais. So, yeah, the demand and responsive system, if someone is at the corner of Angus Campbell Drive and Alfred Street East, or the mall, say someone's at the mall, they get picked up, and somebody is down the road in front of social service building where you go to get your OHIP card, and then they get picked up there. But at the next predetermined, so all the spots are fixed, they're predetermined. And if someone's not at a spot, then the bus will go right by that spot, and that's where you save time. So it's a 30-minute wait. The trouble with the old bus system, I heard, was people had to wait a long time, so then people stopped taking the bus. There was other issues too. We learned from the past. So the demand responsive system would be a 30-minute wait. That's the maximum wait you would have at a stop. And it would tell you what time it's coming. So use a tablet, telephone, there'd be help in the senior's home or the library, you know, different help available. So it is a good system, but there is a software cost. And the demand responsive system is not cheap. It's expensive. And I heard what Councillor Plummer said, and we all feel that way. I've always said a transit system in Pembroke will only work if it's affordable and we have different levels of funding from the government. Also, the Trudeau government has said that they're going to have permanent transit funding available in 2023 or 22. But the most important thing is all of these big cities are getting money for transit. So what about Pembroke? And this is why I like the model of you know, I'm listening to the Deputy Mayor's concerns, the model of the Green Municipal Fund by the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. So you do your pilot project and you see how it works. And if it doesn't work, you don't proceed with the implementation of getting a service provider or buying or leasing these vehicles. You do the one-year pilot project. It doesn't cost anything to apply. So this phase 2 study will bring out that option also. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
Jacquino and his worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Chair. The new technology today with electric busing is phenomenal. And I mean, you know, you may be talking to people, you mentioned you spoke to people that it may not be such a good deal in the winter, et cetera. But the Canadian companies are selling buses in Germany, the UK, France. And, you know, they work under different climatic conditions as well, and they're working. Locomotives will soon be going electric, which means they can pull a full payload that a regular diesel locomotive could pull for 24 hours. They can pull the same amount of freight with an electric battery on that particular train. So you're talking about green funding. There may be private individuals. We have grocery stores, you know, hey, we're paying for your bus fare today because we believe in you, ma'am. We believe in you, sir. You don't have a car. So for today, we're going to foot the bill for you to travel. And trust me, from past experience and having worked in the advertising department, we did that with the Woolworth Corporation that was here. The bus was full. But what happened was they were downtown shopping. They went to the Woolworth store. They went to the jewelry store. They went to the bank. And no one could understand, well, you know, how can they afford to give us the bus? They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that day, and the bus cost us $150 for the rental. So everybody wins. Corporate advertising within the bus, there are ways to offset revenue. And I understand what Councillor Plummer is saying, you know, at the end, what is the bottom line? But there are ways of offsetting revenue if you want it to work. Thank you.
Worship?
Councillor Jacquino covered what I was going to mention is the changes in technology are amazing, especially within the last year. So that's on our side. We're going to see the advancements continue. And I think from the conversation that's ongoing is that it comes down to viability and sustainability, you know, whether it's going to work. So I think that's why phase 2 is important. Thank you.
So seeing no other hands, I'll call the question of the motion that's on the floor. Those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Reevy, seconded by Councillor Frenia. We are adjourned.
I'd like to call this council meeting of Tuesday, November the 16th, 2021 to order. Before opening this meeting of council, I would ask those who wish, each in your own way, silently join in a prayer of guidance over these proceedings. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of our regular council meeting, which was held on November the 2nd, 2021? Moved by Councillor Plummer, seconded by Councillor Reevy. All those in favor? Carried. Adopting the minutes of the Parks and Recreation Committee, which was held on September the 21st, 2021. Moved by Councillor Abdallah, seconded by Councillor Giacono. All those in favor? Carried. The Operations Committee meeting held on October the 19th, 2021. Moved by Councillor Reevy, seconded by Councillor Giacono. All those in favor? Carried. Receiving the minutes from the Pembroke Heritage Murals Committee of November the 3rd, 2021. Moved by Councillor Abdallah, seconded by Councillor Plummer. All those in favor? Carried. Committee reports, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Finance and Administration Committee of Council begs to report and recommend from its meeting held on November 2nd, 2021, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reevy, that request for proposal P21-11 for the supply and delivery of one current year articulated four-wheel drive front end loader with wing and plow be awarded to Brandt Tractor Limited in the amount of $264,000 plus HST, and that any shortfall in funding be covered by the Fleet Reserve.
Any comments? Okay. Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. By virtue of the power vested in me, I do hereby declare November the 14th to the 20th, 2021, as Victims and Survivors of Crime Week in the City of Pembroke. Whereas, when a crime occurs, it doesn't affect just one person, but their family members and the entire community. And whereas victims and survivors of crime and their families deserve support from their community, and whereas many victim service providers, police officers, and professionals working in the criminal justice system provide assistance to victims and survivors of crime and their families. And whereas victims and survivors of crime need to know that they have a voice in our criminal justice system and that there are laws in place to help them. And whereas Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, November the 14th to November the 20th, 2021, offers an opportunity to raise awareness about victim issues and about the services and laws in place to help victims, survivors, and their families. And whereas the theme for Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, the power of collaboration, will help to promote greater understanding of victim issues. And whereas an increased awareness of issues faced by victims and survivors of crime and the disproportionate impact for racialized community members will encourage citizens to discuss the impact of crime. And whereas public demonstrations of support for victims and survivors of crime help to build a community's capacity for compassion to assist them and their families and the community as a whole. And whereas addressing victim and survivor issues requires the support and dedication of the whole community. And whereas the support of the City of Pembroke will encourage a greater number of citizens to participate in Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, therefore, be it resolved that I, Michael LeMay, Mayor of the City of Pembroke, do hereby proclaim November 14th to November the 20th, 2021, as Victims and Survivors of Crime Week in the City of Pembroke. And that during Victims and Survivors of Crime Week and throughout the year, the City of Pembroke will recognize victims and survivors of crime and those who assist them. And be it further resolved that the City of Pembroke will remain committed to addressing and advancing the issues faced by victims and survivors of crime. Dated in the Mayor's office, the 16th day of November, 2021. Bylaws, Bylaw 2021-68. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reevy, that bylaw 2021-68, a bylaw authorizing the execution of necessary documents to transfer an easement to Enbridge Gas, Inc., be adopted and passed, and further that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you. Comments?
Certainly, Your Worship. So as it has come before council previously in committee in April of this year, we know that we've been working at slowly the town line street, and we know that in reviewing that and the town line twinning of the force main, there came to our attention that there's a conflict in respect to the Enbridge Gas, that infrastructure that is there. So this is to enable, to address the Enbridge Gas situation so as to allow us to proceed forward with the town line force main twinning.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Bylaw 2021-69, Councillor Plummer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Giacono, that bylaw 2021-69, a bylaw to appoint auditors for the city of Pembroke, be adopted and passed, and further said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you. Any comments?
No.
All those in favor? Carried. Bylaw 2021-70, amend parking bylaw. Councillor Reevy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Abdallah, that bylaw 2021-70, a bylaw to amend bylaw 2020-74 as amended, being a bylaw to regulate and control the parking of vehicles in the city of Pembroke, be adopted and passed, and further that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you. Any comments?
No comments.
No comments. All those in favor? Carried. Bylaw 2021-71, the sale of land. Councillor Reevy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Abdallah, that bylaw 2021-71, a bylaw to authorize the proposed sale of lands, be adopted and passed, and further that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you. Any comments?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. Following Council's direction from the meeting on November 2nd, staff followed up with the purchaser regarding the 12% minimum lot coverage requirement in the McCool Business Park. The purchaser had no issue increasing the size of his self-storage buildings to meet the minimum requirement.
Thank you. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Bylaw 2021-72, Councillor Giacono.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Abdallah, that bylaw 2021-72, being a bylaw to provide for the stopping up and closing of the gravel hill of Mary Street in the city of Pembroke, be adopted and passed, and further that the said bylaw be signed by yourself, Your Worship, and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation, awaiting your signature.
Thank you. Any comments?
Yes, Your Worship. As per our report of November 2nd, 2021, and the awarding of the contract for the new pedestrian path on the gravel hill off Mary Street, and the August 10th, 2021 committee report directing staff to close the gravel hill to vehicles, a bylaw authorizing the stop-up and permanent closure is now before you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Bylaw 2021-73, Councillor Lafreniere.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Andrew Plummer, that bylaw 2021-73, a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the city of Pembroke, be adopted and passed, and further that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation.
Thank you. Any comments?
Yeah, so this is basically a bylaw to appoint municipal bylaw enforcement officers for the city. Due to recent restructuring and staff changes within the municipality, the bylaw required updating to reflect those changes.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Mayor's report. On Friday evening, I had the pleasure of representing council at the official opening of this year's Silver Stick Tournament. In 1985, the International Silver Stick designated Pembroke as a new regional tournament serving Eastern Ontario and the province of Quebec. This year makes the 36th year of the tournament. 128 teams will be participating over 4 weekends. And I want to thank the Silver Stick Committee members under the leadership of Norbert Chaput, the many volunteers, the corporate sponsors, and the many other sponsors of this regional hockey tournament, which is a tremendous asset to the city of Pembroke. Thankfully, it is possible to hold the tournament this year after last year's Civil Stick was canceled due to COVID-19. On Sunday, I represented council at a special Lumber King pre-game ceremony celebrating the 70th anniversary of the opening of the Pembroke Memorial Centre. On November 14th, 1951, the grand opening of the PMC had a hockey match between the Montreal Canadiens and the Pembroke Senior Lumber Kings. And I want to thank Jamie Bramberger for his leadership and organization of this special tribute to the PMC. And I'd like to quote from an article that Jamie wrote in honor of the PMC, quote, "The early days of the Pembroke Memorial Centre were special. It was the golden era of senior hockey in Pembroke. 7 decades later, the same wooden seats that fans sat on watching that historic game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Senior Lumber Kings remain, a reminder of the building's rich hockey history. Built as a memorial to Pembroke's war dead from the First and Second World Wars, the PMC continues to fulfill its mission as a community hub with hockey as its primary tenant. Frank Nyber would be pleased that 70 years after he helped open the building and more than 55 years after he passed away, the Memorial Centre is still going strong." End of quote. This afternoon, I attended a 100-day countdown of the Ontario Winter Games that are coming to Renfrew County. And Minister MacLeod was in attendance, and she announced that another $400,000 was going to be given to the county to help with the games. So the province is providing $1.4 million to help with the Ontario Games. Rogers were also represented there as they are sponsoring it, and Rogers mentioned that the fact that hometown hockey was coming to Pembroke and that they were very pleased to be able to sponsor that here in the city of Pembroke, which will be on the weekend of December the 4th to the 6th. We are still in a COVID-19 pandemic, and I would again encourage those eligible to receive a vaccine and are still hesitant to please visit the Renfrew County District Health Unit site for information or to speak with your family physician. Vaccines are effective and the best way to protect you and those around you from serious illnesses like COVID-19 and variants of concern. I'd like to again note my gratitude to all people in our community keeping things going as we navigate COVID-19 and its variants. Please continue to follow masking and distancing protocols as recommended. And everyone, please stay safe. Are there any notice of motion? Seeing none, Councillor updates. Councillor Reevy.
Thank you, Your Worship. After a lengthy pandemic hiatus, the Accessibility Advisory Committee met in person in council chambers last week, and we had a quite a full agenda. We had Ms. Marielle McLaughlin, who is our Manager of Operations, speak to the accessibility upgrades that have been completed within the city for 2020-2021. It's impressive, all of the AODA compliance at many of our intersections. We're really moving in the right direction, and committee was thrilled with her report. We also had opportunity to review the 2019 AODA annual report, a lengthy read, but a lot of really good stuff there. We also discussed the City of Pembroke's website, which does need to be meet accessibility compliance. We're not 100% there, but work continues. We're also anxious when the new website is rolled out in several months from now, but we're looking for more accessibility upgrades to that. We established our goals for 2022, and I'll just highlight those. We are going to tour Riverside Park and the Waterfront Park. We're going to reach out to other similar-sized municipalities to their accessibility advisory committees just for information and project sharing. We're also going to invite the city's HR coordinator to a meeting with our committee to review the City of Pembroke employee accessibility and accommodation policies. We felt it was important for us to know where the city sits there. Heidi is currently working on the compliance report as mandated. She did present the report to committee, and there were no issues with that whatsoever. And so it's good. Everybody's happy to be back, and we will be looking to recruit another member shortly, if possible, to round the committee out for the remainder of this council's term. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abdallah?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two items tonight. The first one is on behalf of the Rogers Hometown Hockey Committee and Jamie Bramberger and Algonquin College. Reminder of a free speaker series this Thursday at 7 p.m. online, featuring Ron McLean and Tara Sloan of Rogers Hometown Hockey and Hockey Night in Canada. And you can register online through Eventbrite or through the Algonquin College Facebook page, or you can register online through the college website. So that's a free 1-hour discussion, question and answer with Ron McLean and Tara Sloan of Rogers Hometown Hockey, which is coming here, as the mayor mentioned, December 4th and 6th weekend. And the next one is great news. Update, this is on behalf of the Deputy Mayor Gervais and I. The Community Watch program in Pembroke is moving forward despite the challenges of COVID. We had our latest meeting last night at the Pembroke Fire Hall. It was well attended. It was announced previously by Deputy Mayor Gervais that the first neighborhood was established on Chamberlain Street between River Road and Cecilia, and a sign went up today by the Neighborhood Watch community sign went up today, put up by the Operations Department. The second Neighborhood Watch community will be certified by the Pembroke Police Services Board, and that's in the neighborhood of Victoria Street to Moffat and Mary Street to Renfrew. And so we have two Neighborhood Watch communities that have been established, and a sign will be going up there along with the people who are involved will have a window sticker like this also. And once the Neighborhood Watch community is established, we keep the communication lines open every few months with information delivered to them by email or in their mailbox, telephone network, etc. A couple of comments that were by the volunteer canvassers, which we want to thank for going to their neighborhood and signing people up. The first comment was that the residents knew about the Pembroke Community Watch program, and that's thanks to the PR. It's thanks to this flyer that went out a year ago, thanks to City Council's approval in every tax and water bill that went out. So people knew about the Community Watch. They were glad to see the canvassers come. And there was 100% positive comments. There was no negativity. You just sign up, you provide your name, your phone number, email, and that's all you have to do. So it's a great program. And I want to personally thank Deputy Mayor Gervais as the co-chair. And I want to thank the Police Services Board, which Councillor Reevy and the Deputy Mayor sit on, the City of Pembroke, Constable Sean Peaver of the OPP and the OPP. And I want to thank all the volunteer canvassers. And this is another example of community partnerships working. And it's a great partnership, and it's only to create safe, welcoming neighborhoods in Pembroke. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other comments or updates? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving into a closed session. Councillor Abdallah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Motion for council to move into a caucus meeting on November 16, 2021. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ed Jacquinot, that this meeting become a closed meeting to discuss a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of lands by the municipality or local board.
All those in favor? Okay, we'll now move into closed session. Thank you.